Hello, true crime friends. Welcome back to From the Dark Side. I'm your host, Sherry. The other night, I come in the room and my husband is watching this program on Netflix. I'm like, this is a true crime documentary. You never watch true crime, so this must be really good. The program was called Murder in Monaco, written by Sam Hopkinson. So it's about halfway through the program when I came in, and I stay in the room because I'm intrigued by what I'm watching. I realized, number one, that I've never heard of this case before. Number two, this is one of the most insane cases, even by my standards, I've never heard of, and I wanted to tell you guys about it. I want to add in here real quick that this story could easily be a 10-part podcast. We could stretch this out over hours. I don't have that kind of time, so I've condensed it into a 30-minute story. Let's get into it now. My sources are in the description area. This is episode 185, The Case of Ted Maher. We're heading back to 1999, which may or may not have been the year I graduated high school. We closed out the century and everyone was worried about Y2K and the crashing of information systems. The world's population hit 6 billion. 11 European nations adopted the euro as their currency. Author Stephen King was hit by a minivan and sustained extensive injuries. He had a team of nurses caring for him, and they were all warned that if they made any misery jokes, they would be fired. And most importantly, in 1999, SpongeBob made his debut on television. To begin our story, I need to talk about a little place on the French Riviera, Monaco. It's known as the second smallest country. Monaco is less than 2 miles in total. Monaco is bordered by France on 3 sides. The other side is the Mediterranean Sea. Monaco is considered a playground for extremely wealthy folks. It's a very luxurious place to live and also the safest place to live in the world. You can't just say, I'm going to move to Monaco. You have to be accepted, which is a process. You have to prove your net worth. You can't have any blemishes on your record. Monaco, again, is considered one of the safest places in the world. It's a very tiny area, and everywhere you walk, there are just multimillionaires and billionaires. Everybody is super rich. Crime is pretty much non-existent. There's no murders, no robberies, none of that. The last crime committed in Monaco with a firearm was in 1986. It's just luxury everywhere you turn. It's also extremely clean. A lot of F1 drivers who are making millions of dollars per year live in Monaco. Bono from U2 has a house there, and so does Ringo Starr. To rent a house in Monaco, the rent is 700% higher than it is in the United States. The cost of groceries is much more than what it is here in the US as well. I looked it up, and a can of Coke is $7. But in return, you get to be in the beautiful, safe atmosphere of Monaco, surrounded by yachts and mega skyrise luxury apartments. So the biggest perk to being a citizen of Monaco, this is the reason so many super wealthy people move there. There is 0 income tax. Also, no property tax and no capital gains tax. That sounds absolutely amazing. Unless you're a French citizen, then you have to pay taxes. But for billionaires, living in Monaco saves them from paying millions in taxes every year. Now that you know all about Monaco, we can talk about a man named Ted Maher. In case anyone says I'm mispronouncing his name, I've heard his last name be pronounced several different ways, Maher, Mar. The one I'm going with is the one I heard Ted say himself. He said his last name is Maher. Ted is a very busy neonatal nurse who lives in New York and works at the Columbia Medical Center in New York City. His wife Heidi works there as well. They have a normal life for 2 working professionals, and they have 3 children. The oldest was Ted's son from a previous marriage. Then they had 2 children together. I read that Ted actually delivered these 2 children himself. Ted and Heidi have been married for about 6 years. They live an ordinary life very far away from the glitz and glamour of Monaco. One day, Ted is at work and he finds a camera left behind from a patient. Back then, film would need to be developed to see the pictures, so Ted took the roll of film to the store and had it developed. He sees they were photos of a family that had been discharged recently. They had a newborn set of twins. So Ted tracks them down, and the couple was super thankful because they thought they lost the first pics of their twins, but luckily this sweet nurse Ted found them. Mr. Slotkin, the husband, thanks Ted again, and he kind of looks him over for a minute. He says, "I think I might have something you would love." Mr. Slotkin pulls him aside and says, "Look, what you did was really kind. Well, I work with the ultra wealthy. I do things for them. I know a billionaire right now who lives in a penthouse in Monaco. He's 67 years old and he's got Parkinson's disease. He has several nurses on his staff at his home around the clock. How would you like to go work for him?" Ted's like, "This sounds like the job of a lifetime, but I've got my wife and 3 kids. I don't think I could pull it off living next door to France while they're here in the States." So Mr. Slotkin thinks he has a way to make Ted want to go. He says the man would pay him $600 per day plus a $10,000 a month salary. This is way more than his nurse's salary. Also, this was in 1999. That same money today in 2026 would be astronomical. He could send money home to his wife. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Even if he just did it for a year, he'd be making enough money to last a long time. Plus, he and Heidi were in jeopardy of losing their jobs at the hospital since there were talks about an upcoming nurses' strike. Ted also had $60,000 in legal fees he accumulated through a recent custody dispute of his son with his ex-wife. Ted is sold on the idea. He'll live in beautiful Monaco, caring for this aging billionaire with Parkinson's in his $314 million penthouse. The man's name was Edmond Safra. Ted met with his assistant, and the assistant really liked that Ted was not only a nurse, but a former Green Beret. This is like having another bodyguard who doubled as a nurse. Edmond had multiple bodyguards and armed security at his home, so what's one more? Ted agreed to take the job. Let's talk about who Edmond Safra is. I mentioned earlier he is 67 years old. Edmond is a billionaire who is married to a woman named Lily. Edmond is one of the wealthiest men in the world. He was born in Lebanon and grew up in a banking dynasty founded by his father, Jacob. Edmond started working for his father at the young age of just 15. He was sent by his father to Milan as a teenager, where he established a gold trading and foreign exchange operation. Edmond took this family business and turned it into an empire. He founded the Trade Development Bank and the Republic National Bank of New York. Suddenly, his hard work earned him millionaire status and then multi-billionaire. It wasn't always easy, though. Edmond made a lot of enemies through the years. In 1983, Edmond merged his bank with American Express. According to NBC News, when the merger didn't work out, executives at American Express spread rumors that Edmond was laundering money for organized crimes. Luckily, these were just rumors. He wasn't really doing that we know of. Edmond felt betrayed, though, and he started becoming really distrustful of others. His paranoia started increasing, and this never left. He stayed this way the rest of his life. Edmond never had any children. Lily is his wife, who he married in 1976. Edmond was her 4th husband. So Edmond was always leery about getting married since he didn't want someone to be with him just for his money. But Lily had her own money. She was a socialite and a multimillionaire who amassed a whole lot of wealth through her past marriages. Lily was generous, though. She did a lot of charity work, and she had 5 honorary doctorate degrees. In 2012, she auctioned off 70 pieces of her jewelry, which raised $20 million for several charities. Now, Lily had adult children of her own who Edmond loved and cared for, but he never wanted any kids of his own. Edmond is in his upper 60s now and still relatively young, but he had developed Parkinson's disease and wasn't doing so great. He donated $50 million to Parkinson's research, which was just amazing. These two seem like pretty okay billionaires in my book. They lived together in Monte Carlo in Monaco in a $314 million penthouse. This house was absolutely one of the most beautiful homes I've ever seen. I can't remember if I said this earlier, but in Monaco, the houses aren't so much wide like they are in Beverly Hills or some other city with large homes. They are just extremely tall, like your house could be 17 floors high. Monaco is a very small country, so all the houses are more tall than wide. This house is just enormous, though, and wide and tall. It's one of the biggest places around. Edmond had a team consisting of 7 nurses that cared for him around the clock. He also had an elite team of bodyguards and security guards at all times. The house was bulletproof. The windows had stainless steel shutters. This place is super high tech. No one is getting in here. Monaco is one of the safest places in the world to live, as I mentioned earlier, but Edmond still took every precaution, so he made his house a fortress. Ted said goodbye to his family and promised to call them all the time and send lots of money home. I don't know if he planned to work there for a few months or a year or two, but this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. He was flown to Nice, France, and a limo was waiting for him when he got off the plane. The limo takes him to Edmond's house, where he says there were armed security guards standing everywhere, which made him feel a little uneasy. But he has never been anywhere like this in his life. These guards were not just from some private security firm. They were from the Mossad, which is an Israeli intelligence agency. This is super wealthy people stuff. Ted was interviewed by a psychologist to make sure he was telling the truth and he's not some criminal coming after Edmond. Afterwards, Lily comes out and meets with Ted. Ted describes Lily, and he didn't say out of my league, but he implied that she was this extremely wealthy woman who had zero in common with him and just gave off a very different aura. Lily liked Ted, and she liked that he was a former Green Beret. He got the job and would start the next day. It took some getting used to for Ted being away from his family, but he's making money hand over fist, and his family was doing really well back home. Ted told NBC News that working for Edmond was a lot different than his job back in New York. He's used to running a very busy neonatal ward. It's hectic 24/7. At Edmond's home, he's basically just sitting next to his bedside and checking vitals occasionally and getting him water, his medicine, or whatever he needs. Ted says that some nights when Edmond was sleeping, it was hard to stay awake. He had to be careful, though, since other nurses in the past had been fired for sleeping on the job. There were some things going on inside that penthouse, though. Edmond was great. Edmond had his own room where the nurses could tend to him, and Lily had her own room in a separate wing. There were no issues with Edmond or Lily. So Ted was this well-respected neonatal nurse who worked in a very busy hospital in New York City. Some of Edmond's other nurses, including the head nurse, didn't have the experience and credentials that Ted had. At least that's what Ted thought. He felt like he was taking orders from people who were beneath him, and he wanted the position of lead nurse. One of the nurses that worked for Edmond said in the documentary Murder in Monaco that an example of this was Ted and another nurse would go to lift Edmond out of bed, and Ted would say, "Easy, easy," to the other nurse. So it made it sound like he was the only one who knew what he was doing, or that the other nurse wasn't lifting properly. Side note, I'm surprised Ted really cared that much about climbing the ladder. He's got this dream job, but apparently it wasn't enough. Ted told NBC reporter Sarah James all the places he visited in Monaco, Edmond's bank, his offices, everything was beyond your wildest dreams. It was like working for a king. In the early morning of December 3rd, 1999, this is around 6 weeks since Ted started this job, tragedy struck at Edmond's penthouse. There was a massive fire that broke out, huge billows of smoke going into the sky. This is a very rare thing for Monaco. Things like this don't happen ever. Lily, Edmond's wife, managed to escape through a window. She was on the other side of the house when the fire broke out, but Edmond was still trapped inside, one of the richest men in the world, and he's inside this burning building. So there is a lot of controversy here because it took so long to put the fire out. It was allegedly an hour or two before the fire was contained because it was so enormous, and also because everything was so secure. You've got locks and stainless steel shutters on the windows, reinforced doors. Emergency services were not prepared for anything of this magnitude. The house was built to protect Edmond, but it also compromised rescue. When they finally get inside, they found the bodies of Edmond Safra and one of his nurses, a woman by the name of Vivian Torrente. They had died from smoke inhalation. They were found in the bathroom. This bathroom isn't your normal bathroom. First off, it's enormous. There's furniture and stuff in there. This bathroom also doubles as a panic room. It had a stainless steel door that locked from the inside and was soundproof. Why did they lock themselves in there, and why didn't they escape? Someone who can give us this info stumbles from the house. Ted was found wounded, but alive. He had stab wounds to his abdomen and his thighs. Ted said it was a normal night. Nurse Vivian and him were taking turns at Edmond's bedside. It was Vivian's turn, so she was in his room. Ted was at the nurse's station. He walked into the gym area and picked up a weight he sometimes used to lift to keep himself awake. It was very quiet. But little did he know, some intruders had entered the penthouse, 2 men dressed in black. So how did they get in? Well, security had the night off. Allegedly, Lily had given them the night off and told them they could go sleep in their other estate they owned 10 miles away. Ted was attacked from behind. Using his Green Beret training, he fought off the 2 intruders, but he was stabbed and went unconscious for a few minutes. When he came to, he notified Nurse Vivian and told her to take his cell phone and get Edmond into the safe room. Vivian made a number of calls from Ted's cell phone to other nurses while in the safe room with Edmond. Edmond refused to open the door to the safe room because he was convinced the police and firefighters were assassins. Trigger warning, I'm going to describe what the firefighters found when they opened the safe room. Edmond and Vivian were deceased from smoke inhalation. Edmond was sitting up in a chair. His eyes had popped out of his head and skin was charred black. Vivian was laying on the floor, and both had a cell phone next to them. Ted was rushed to the hospital and later informed that Edmond and Nurse Vivian were deceased. There was a lot of talk about who could have done this. Was it possible it was the Russian mafia? According to NBC News, Edmond had suspected that he had people out to get him because he had been cooperating with the U.S. government to expose Russian money laundering. He helped break up a $6 billion scheme. Yeah, that is going to make you some enemies for sure. Edmond Safra was laid to rest on December 6 in Geneva. The next day, December 7th, prosecutors announced they had a suspect in custody, Nurse Ted Maher, the one who was supposed to be the hero, the one who fought off the intruders. Investigators say that's not what happened at all. There was no evidence of a break-in or any intruders. There are security cameras all over this penthouse, and none of them showed any intruders. According to the prosecutor, Ted did not get along with the lead nurse whatsoever. According to the LA Times, Ted was so bothered by fighting with this woman so much that he started taking medication. They alleged that Ted forged a plan to save Edmond's life so he could be the hero and get promoted, but it went awry. He stabbed himself in the abdomen and thighs in spots that he knew wouldn't be fatal. He's a nurse, he would know these things. Then he started the fire thinking it would just set off the alarm. Which is crazy because Edmond spent millions of dollars on security. He took all the precautions and he had the very best security system and an elite team to guard him from others. And the one who caused his death ended up being from someone on the inside. Also, these intruders that Ted says came into the home, they didn't do anything except stab Ted. Nothing was stolen. Edmond wasn't assassinated. What was the point in them being there? Was it just to stab Ted? Ted signed a confession in his hospital bed. He went to trial. His lawyers argued that yes, he did an incredibly stupid thing, but he never intended to kill anyone. He says the fire was an accident. Ted says he set a fire in a wastebasket using tissue so the smoke alarm would go off and emergency services would be alerted, which makes me wonder why he didn't just call them from his cell phone. So this fire that Ted started in the wastebasket to alert the authorities ended up getting out of control and consuming the whole building. Luckily, Lily, Edmond's wife, was able to escape. If there were intruders, Ted should have known there was a panic button in Edmond's bedroom that he could have hit and police would be notified instantly. He said he didn't know anything about this button. Ted would later argue that he was forced to sign a confession at the hospital. Ted says that the police told him, "You're going to sign this," and they showed him his wife's passport. Ted says the document was fully in French and he had no idea what he was signing when he signed it. Monaco police say this is all wrong and he had access to an English translator the whole time he was in the hospital. Ted recanted his confession eventually. He says now he didn't do this. He says Edmond was his golden goose. Why would he want to screw this up? He was making a ton of money and had no reason to kill Edmond. At trial, Ted says Edmond was the best employer he ever had. He did not mean to cause his death or nurse Vivian's. Ted was found guilty and sentenced to 10 years in prison. In the winter of 2003, Ted had just started his 10-year prison sentence. Now he's in a prison in Monaco, which is the best prison in the world. Here in the United States, prisons are extremely overcrowded and dangerous. Monaco prison holds less than 50 prisoners, but there's usually less than 10. Most are visitors in there for drunk driving or financial crimes. Inmates are served steak and lobster and they have views of the Mediterranean Sea. It's basically a 5-star hotel. So this place isn't bad. Yeah, he's away from his wife and kids and not making any money now, but he allegedly killed 2 people, so this is a best case scenario for Ted. The lavish prison in Monaco where Ted isn't meant for long-term sentences though. Ted knows he's going to be moved to a prison in Nice, France. He was told his days in Monaco are numbered. Soon you will have to leave and be transferred to France. The prison where Ted would be moved to is described as medieval. It's overcrowded, it's not comfortable, and it's a really dangerous prison. A complete contrast to what he currently has in Monaco. Ted talks to another prisoner and asks him, "Do you want to escape from here?" This prisoner is Italian, and I can't remember what he was in for, but I want to think he was awaiting trial for theft. They were able to saw through the bars on the window, and they used black trash bags to tie together to make a rope. Ted was now free. He made it 15 miles on foot to Nice, France, where he was able to get a hotel. Ted called his wife, his priest, and his lawyer, and all 3 turned him in, which is insane. He was quickly captured and returned to prison. Ted will tell you today that he was forced to sign that confession, that he had threats against himself and his wife and his children. He claims his wife came to Monaco and was held for days in a hotel room with cameras. Ted says men in a van picked him up off the street one day before the fire. They told him he was going to make sure one of those steel windows was left open. So it seems like what the investigators and prosecutors laid out was exactly what happened. Ted self-inflicted these injuries. The knife found covered in blood was Ted's switchblade knife. He told Vivian to take Edmond to the safe room. He started a small fire and it got out of control before he had the chance to rescue Edmond. Edmond refused to leave the safe room anyway. Now, I did read on NBC News that Vivian Torrente's neck had bruising around it. Her family believes this area was not investigated properly. Is it possible that Edmond refused to allow Vivian to leave the safe room because he feared an assassin would slip in as soon as she opened the steel door? An attorney for Lily Safra said that it is absurd to believe that Edmond strangled Nurse Vivian and that the bruising likely came from Edmond leaning on her while he was being transported. According to the New York Post, Vivian's family sued the Safra estate for $100 million. The lawsuit alleged that Edmond's DNA was found underneath her fingernails and she had marks on her neck and bruises on her knees. I find it hard to believe this man dying of Parkinson's had the strength to prevent this woman from leaving the safe room, but who knows what happened. Both of them are now dead. Since the documentary Murder in Monaco came out on Netflix in December 2025, many have voiced their opinions of what happened that night. Ted has already served his entire prison sentence, though, so opinions don't really matter at this point. Before we discuss any of the speculation, let me be clear that Lily Safra, Edmond's wife, was never charged, arrested, formally accused, and Monaco authorities found no evidence that implicated her. This is pure speculation. But many allege that Lily, Edmond's wife, had something to do with this. Is it possible that she paid Ted to do this? Is that why security had the night off? Lily did inherit $4 billion tax-free from Edmond's death. That's $4 billion, not $4 million, $4 billion. Some will tell you to look at Lily's past. She had multiple husbands, and when each one ended in divorce or death, she inherited more and more money. She was a multimillionaire before she ever met Edmond. The husband that she was married to right before she married Edmond, he died of suicide. He had shot himself in the chest twice. Everybody brings that up, that twice. The only thing I can find to counter that was that CBS News obtained documents which were a death certificate and the police report, and neither of them stated 2 shots. I'd think that info would be in the autopsy, though, not the death certificate. So I went on Reddit looking for what the public believes happened. Again, for emphasis, these are just opinions. Users say they believe Lily had everything to do with Edmond's death. She convinced Ted under the promise of money, but in the end, she threw him under the bus. I see their point, but I wonder why Ted wouldn't speak up about it unless he was afraid of her. Others believe that Lily wouldn't risk a murder conviction when Edmond was dying anyway. One user stated that if she was going to ask a nurse to kill her husband, she probably would have requested a large dose of morphine or something like that. She wouldn't have said, "Stab yourself and then burn down my beautiful home." It's noted that Lily was starting to control the finances, which does seem suspicious until we remember that Edmond is dying of Parkinson's. He's likely not in the best shape to be making financial decisions. In normal marriages with normal income, we wouldn't think twice about a spouse taking over the finances when the other is dying. They bring up that yes, Lily inherited $4 billion tax-free after Edmond died, but the day before he died, she was worth $1 billion. Of course, people want to look at who benefited the most. It was Lily. But financial benefit by itself is not evidence. That's in every case. The other reason people believe it was Lily is because no one can believe Ted was stupid enough to do such a thing. But courts don't require motives to be sensible. I'll follow up with that by saying Ted still proclaims his innocence. Ted claims he was a sacrificial lamb. He says he took the fall to protect Monaco's image. Ted's wife, Heidi, stood by him for a long time, but they divorced after she turned him in for escaping from prison. Heidi filed a $60 million lawsuit against Lily Safra. I believe it was eventually withdrawn. There's not a lot of public info out there about her. After Ted was released from prison, he returned to the United States. He had a lot of trouble finding work. As soon as employers learned of his past, he was fired. He did find work at a nursing home, but in 2013, the Texas Board of Nursing revoked his license. It was at this time Ted changed his name to John Green. He got a job as a truck driver and eventually met a new woman, a doctor by the name of Kim Lark. She knew about his past, but she believed him that there were two intruders that attacked him and he wasn't really a murderer. They got married in 2020. According to Alex Gorley for People magazine, 3 years into their relationship, Ted began acting erratically, and his new wife Kim is like, yeah, no, this is not happening. She ended up having to get a restraining order against him, but Ted continued to harass her. In 2022, Dr. Kim says that Ted broke into her office. He stole an iPad, $600 in cash, a handgun, and a checkbook. He tried to cash a check for $44,000 at his local bank, and the bank thought it was suspicious. When police arrived, Ted fled, but he was eventually caught. This woman is probably like, what the heck have I gotten myself into? I should have just stayed single. 1 month later, Ted stole her Ford Explorer. She had gone into a meeting and left her car running with the air conditioning on. The car was locked, but Ted managed to get in because he had broken into her home that morning and stolen the extra set of keys. Unfortunately, inside the car at the time he stole it were 3 of her prized dogs. These aren't just house pets, they are very well-trained search and rescue dogs. The dogs were eventually found safe. One had just given birth to a litter of 8 puppies. Someone tipped off the FBI, and Ted was found in a VA hospital in San Antonio, Texas. He was placed under arrest. I really feel bad for this lady trusting Ted the way she did. In 2022, she told NBC News, "I feel disgusted at myself for believing him. It makes me wonder what else he did that I don't know about." She also told the New York Post in 2024, "Honestly, I think everything out of his mouth is a lie. He's a con artist. He can be whatever he needed to be." In 2023, Ted was sent to prison for forgery. While in prison, he attempted to hire someone to kill his ex-wife, Kim. He told the guy that she had money hidden away in her home, kill her and grab the money and we can split it. This other prisoner tipped off the police, and Ted was arrested for murder for hire. In July 2025, he was sentenced to 9 years in prison. He is currently 67 years old and in prison. He's expected to be released in 2034 when he is 76 years old. However, he is suffering with late-stage throat cancer, according to the New York Post, so he may not survive the next 9 years. To me, Ted was a seemingly normal guy before he took the job in Monaco. I'd like to think that if he would have never gone over there, maybe his life wouldn't have taken such a bad turn. But he did all this other stuff back in the States once he was out of prison, so maybe not. Lily Safra died in 2022 at age 87. She had been suffering with pancreatic cancer. People have mixed emotions about her because a lot believe she had something to do with Edmond's murder. But she did all this charity work and was a decent person in life. She donated hundreds of millions of dollars. These weren't for tax write-offs either because she lives in Monaco. She doesn't have to pay taxes. This was just her being generous. The whole case was definitely a wild ride. I'm surprised it hasn't been turned into a movie yet. I definitely recommend checking out Murder in Monaco. It's trending on Netflix right now, and it was a really good watch. Rest in peace to Edmond Safra and Vivian Torrente. That's it for this week, and I'll see you all again soon. Take care, and much love to you all.